When I left the subject before the break, I gave you an example of disidentification, in which I showed you that the self, although it uses the body, the physical body, is not part of it. And that was the whole purpose of that exercise, was to point out that no matter how intimately you may be involved in chasing the self, you can't get hold of it and trim its ears for it or something like that. It is quite distinct. And disidentification can be taken right through all the bodies. And the beauty of it is that it strengthens your understanding of the self, that there is a self, and that you can't rule it, you can't mutilate it. It is there, and it is eternal, and it is immortal. No matter what you try and do, it is still going to survive. And so you should take this process of disidentification through. It's, shall I say, easy to do it with a physical body, but it's not quite so easy when you come to the emotional or an astral body, to be able to say, yes, this person sitting in the car, ranting and raving because there's a traffic jam on, is not me. It's not me at all. I'm just doing it to let off steam, we say, and we excuse ourselves. But there are many who identify themselves with their emotions and enjoy it and love it and throw themselves all over the floor and goodness knows what in the process of identifying themselves with their astral bodies. But for man treading the path, and also for the person seeking psychosynthesis, the ability to be stable under tremendous difficulties, it's useful to practice disidentification. It's also useful for a person who is alcoholic or knows an alcoholic, for them to be able to say, this is not me, lying here in a drunken stupor, I can't lift myself out of the gutter. I'm something more than this. I'm something more than this person screaming out of the car window at the nearby taxi man. I'm not as crude and as rough and as disorganized and disordered as this structure doing all this. And it's very, very helpful to be able to do it. And it's very hard, as you know, to be able to think about something totally dispassionately. Dispassionately. Women have a greater difficulty with this because women are positive emotionally and men are negative emotionally. Women are negative physically and men are positive physically, as you would, of course, understand. We are like the plates of a battery, that the physical body, mine, is positive, my astral body is negative, my mental body is positive, my, soul, if you like, is negative. Or receptive, you don't have to use the word negative, receptive. And that is why women who mainly have positive emotional natures and set them going very, very quickly, very easily, pull them into action easily, have more difficulty with their emotions. Not always true, but generally so. So disidentification can be a very useful procedure in being able to recognize that there is a higher self. The next thing, of course, is to be able to say what that higher self is, nature is. by that we mean, yes, we say the higher self is perfect. What we mean by that is that the higher self, given sufficient number of lives, sufficient opportunities to accept challenge, is capable of perfection, whereas the physical body will never be perfect. I think they took 10,000 university students and examined them very, very carefully to find any student who was totally perfect. And I think they found in 14,000, I think they found less than a dozen who were absolutely perfect. That was 30 years ago. Teeth, everything. So the higher self has a degree of perfection according to what it has experienced. The age of the higher self is important. How many lives? Under what circumstances? But it has a nature. And we can test the degree of integration of a personality. We can test it. And many people like to know what those tests are. The ultimate test is initiation. If you survive the initiation, and we call it the third degree initiation, then you have proved that you are an integrated personality. Now, I can't vouch for that today because initiation, as it has been, is gone, wiped out. Initiation is now in groups, not in individuals. It's now in groups, and it's part of our work, my work certainly, to determine how to apply the initiatory forces effectively to groups. We don't know yet. We don't know what kind of force the forces are to. The force of increase of life thrown through the individuals and the group collectively. That's one of the aspects of initiation. And the second is consciousness. To what extent can you, to what degree can you extend the consciousness of a group? The Churchill description is brilliant. And of course he did it unconsciously, his description, of having the mind taken by these alien beings in the inner sanctum and applying force, these tremendous initiation forces of making you more alive, channeling more life force through you, and at the same time extending your awareness. Think of what you can grasp with your mind. And think of having that extended deliberately by extra systemic forces so that you can grasp perhaps 1,000 times more. Grasp, understand, comprehend, hold your consciousness to, concentrate on all these elements of awareness, extended deliberately through higher beings acting upon you. And as I've just said, initiation is initiation when it's happened. You have survived it. Many people don't. In the past it was well known that many people could not survive an initiation. All right, here are some of the indications of an integrating personality. I can't say they're integrated until they've had that kind of force thrown through them. They may not always be totally aware of it. They may be just aware of the fact that they've had an off day, and one in which their minds had become elevated and had partly lost contact rather than control. I know I'm speaking mystically, but let's consider some of these. Here's some of the indications of an integrating personality. And integrating means that they are under particular stress while they are integrating. Just trying to think of an analogy for it. Firstly, spiritual immaturity must be overcome. Spiritual immaturity. Credible matters. All right? Inability to maintain focus or the attention is a sign of course, if you're suffering from anemia and you've only got a lowered hemoglobin percentage because you are a woman and you are losing blood greatly from the endometrium, of course you're susceptible to anemia, and of course the brain can't get the oxygen it needs because you haven't got the hemoglobin to carry it. I'm not talking about pathological states. I'm just saying that where there is generally an inability to maintain your concentration, you must suspect spiritual immaturity. That could be described in many ways, like bodies being out of alignment, and so on. But it's worth remembering these things. And if you have difficulty with focusing the attention, you must suspect that there is some element of spiritual immaturity somewhere. Perhaps lack of enthusiasm, lack of involvement. People say to me, why the hell is it that you get all these things from on high? The only answer I've got is that I'm committed. I'm damn committed. It's not just Sunday nights for me. All day, every day, and I mean what I do. If you can summon that kind of commitment, then you are talking about spiritual maturity. It doesn't mean to say you've got to be damned unhappy all day and every day. But worth thinking about. Signs of spiritual immaturity. They project their defects, the causes of their condition, onto others. Not my fault, her fault. She gets all the kudos for everything in our family. Not my fault at all. You know what I mean by that. Projecting your difficulties onto others and blaming them. That is spiritual immaturity. Stand up and accept your responsibility. Face your challenges. Don't run away from them. If you've never had any experience of conquering things in your life, conquering alcoholism or overcoming smoking or what I described earlier, then you can't claim that you are spiritually mature. Spiritually mature people have to have triumphed over the challenges in this world. Thirdly, the immature spiritually want feedback. Hey, look at me, look what I've done. Isn't this good? Do you think I'm doing it right? Tell me, oh, do you think I'm doing it right? I am? Ah, that's great. You know what I mean? And when you're the boss of the task force, it can be maddening to have people asking for feedback all the time. And if some people can't get feedback, they get ulcers. It's well known in gastric ulcers. Today they know there's also a bacterial origin or a viral origin for ulcers, gastric ulcers. But it used to be indicative, certainly, that a person was not getting feedback from the boss, especially sometimes from the spouse. Next, a lack of spiritual guts to persist. They fall away. Oh no, I can't finish this job. You know, you expect too much of us. I've got to go back home, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, I can't possibly finish it. But I admire the way you're doing it, lacking spiritual guts to persist. Next, shy away from the dirty jobs. Shying away from the dirty jobs, even though they are very necessary. They have to be done. Somebody's got to do them. But on the day that the dirty job has to be done, they're not there. Perhaps emptying the garbage or something like that. I remember how Mahatma Ghandi used to have people from Western drawing rooms, Britain, would come out and work in Mahatma Gandhi's village, and would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go down into the village and empty all the latrines. Now you would say, well, that's a bit harsh. Yes, today it's a bit harsh. But there were women that used to do that year in and year out. And they regarded it as part and parcel of their spiritual discipline to show that they were capable of the filthy jobs as well as the good ones. Now you may say today, well, we don't look on it like that. But that's how it was in Gandhi's time, certainly. Shy away from dirty jobs, even though they're very, very necessary. I always say, if you begin to get full of hubris, cocky, everything's going your way, and getting a little bit too big for your boots, the gods hate it. They absolutely hate hubris. And in ancient days, if anybody began to get like that, or if anybody had a run of success after success after success, they'd begin to tremble because they were competing with the gods. And nobody wanted to be guilty of hubris, of being what I just described. The great story of Polycrates, the king Polycrates, who everything was going his way and he began to tremble in his boots. So he was walking along the seashore one day and trembling in his boots. So he pulled off the huge ring that he had and threw it into the breakers. There, I've lost fortune at this moment. That should please the gods. Sat down to dinner tonight, and the cook brought in the fish, opened it up, and there was the ring on his plate. And the story is told that a few months later, he was deposed. There was a rebellion, and he got deposed and lost his life, and so on. And the gods don't like hubris. So I say that it's good when you're feeling full of hubris to get down and scrub a floor here, or some dirty, filthy job, having to see somebody you detest, and you've got to see them and do the job, and you feel better for it. The soul wakes up a little bit and says, yeah, I've done that. That pulled me down a few pegs or two. The hubris is gone. Shying away from dirty jobs. Next, won't work in a group or make concessions. Yes, don't like working in a group myself very much. Somebody gives me a car for my tours. Some young blighter comes along and drives it as if it was his own. The things that happen in the catering department. You have to sit down with them all and eat food cooked by some new guy who's come into the ashram and had to do his share of cooking, and find all kinds of things disappear, the useful things in your life pencil sharpeners and so on disappear, and it goes on and on and on and on. That's group life. Group life. And you have to put up with it. And of course, the easiest thing to do is say, no, I won't work in groups. I'm not going to work in groups. I'm far too good to be used in a group. And that is very indicative of not being adaptable. Malleable, we call it. Malleable. It's one of the most important daily disciplines, is to keep yourself malleable to circumstances. The work is the main thing. The work. All right? Loneliness. Loneliness. There's not a person in the esoteric world who doesn't occasionally suffer from loneliness, you'd say. It's the kind of loneliness that you know what I mean, where things go wrong, you've got no recourse, you may have severed your links with your family, so you can't go whining back to them. Nobody takes any notice of your efforts. You're all alone. You begin to pour on the self-pity, and you think you're alone in the world. Well, that is spiritual immaturity, because you have a higher self. And the higher self is never far from you. You may shut it out with your negative attitude. I'm all alone. And you shut out the higher self. But the truth is, you are part of your higher self. And if you adopted the correct procedure and attitude and maintained poise and harmony in your personality and were psychosynthesizing, the higher self would be able to reach you. You'd never feel the loneliness. But you do go through it at the beginning. It's quite natural to go through phases of loneliness, but you have to learn to get over it. It's just lack of spiritual maturity that you don't understand. You're never alone. The worst one of all is the last, reverting to old ways. Reverting to old ways. There's nothing more heartbreaking to the Mahatmas than disciples that struggle and fight their battles and get so near to psychosynthesis, of rounding themselves out completely, and then it all seems too much and they revert. They revert to their old ways. And that can be very heartbreaking for the Mahatmas. So signs of spiritual immaturity suggest that you are not making the headway towards psychosynthesis that perhaps you should be. Now I'm going to tell you the next thing which indicates spiritual maturity. Maturity, not immaturity, maturity. And I suppose we must say that people who are becoming spiritually mature rapidly begin to develop this sense of destiny. Churchill describes it, how at a certain phase in the war, when the war was darkest, the chances of losing the war were most obvious, that he began to get this feeling of destiny, and that everything that he was doing would be written down and recorded and would be part of the myth and legend of the nation. And it's a fragment of that. We can't all be Churchill, but it's a fragment of that I'm referring to here. Sometimes it just lies in your unconscious. Sometimes it shows as terrible unrest. You feel that there's something that you have to do, that you're not walking with destiny. You're not doing it yet. It's there, but you haven't done it yet. That maybe you need to have something dreadful happen. I'm thinking now of the royal family during the World War II, and they felt that they were living too well, that the East Enders were being bombed and smashed to bits day after day after day and right through the night, and everything was awful. And suddenly a bomb landed on the palace and blew part of of their apartments away, and they felt they were part of it all, and that now that they were walking with destiny, and that the war, won or lost, they were part of it. Well, I'm trying to describe things that are not very obvious. It comes out in first-ray souls like Asajoli. It comes out in this suggestion again. I have this feeling always with me. It's like a divine unrest. I can't settle down because I know I have something unique and important to do in this life. And that which is unique and important to me is that I must be about my Father's business. And that's what I mean by spiritual maturity. And you see them. Not so much today, but you used to see them. You used to see people with such sense of spiritual destiny, always with a book, always. Going to work on the train and have a book with them, and they would read it and put it away and go walk into where they worked and so on, but never without a book. And quite often in those days it was a Bailey book. It was a Bailey book which you had to do that. You couldn't get through the Bailey books. There was such an immense library of them. And so that sort of divine unrest and persistence, feeling of destiny, usually indicates a first ray somewhere, most often at the soul level. Secondly, the spirituality is obvious for everyone to observe because he's raising the consciousness of those around them. People seek him out. He's become an emotional waste paper basket for people. They come along and dump their excessive emotions into this person, a spiritual being who is trying to do his best and is being imposed upon but still doesn't complain. I don't mean the martyr complex. I mean the natural capacity to take suffering from the community around him and at the same time to raise them up. That's what I meant about spirituality, the effort put into raising those around you in their awareness. Next. These people who not only sense their destiny, but they have visions of that destiny. They're quite certain what is going to happen, and they are made joyous by it. And they begin to have these strong visions. You know what a vision is? It's like a dream, except that the dream is charged with energy. Everything is shooting energy off it. In the dream, the energy seems to be being emitted from different parts of the person's body, and the face is aglow, and it's like touching somebody who's got static, and the energy bursts off them like that. That's what a vision's like, and the effect of the vision is that you remember it. You can forget your dream. A dream it's usually because it's charged with energy, charged with what we call fire, solar fire. And then you remember it, and you can recall it during the day. When you're in periods of great stress and tension and hurt, it's as if there is this energy from an archetype discharging itself into you to help you to keep going, doing what you're doing. That's a sign of spiritual maturity. Then you begin to be aware that that your life, your daily life, is being directed for you. That you haven't to spend so much time and energy making decisions like you used to have. And decision making was such a nuisance. Now your decisions come easier to you. You make them emphatically. You feel determined about them. And more than anything, you begin to be aware that there's a meaning behind what you're doing. You are what Alice Bailey calls soul infused. See also Alice Bailey's Esoteric Psychology of the Seven Rays, Volume 2, page 266-7. Esoteric Psychology 2, Alice Bailey's, page 266-7. And that is a preparation. It's an indication that you are ready for transfiguration. You're ready for transfiguration. When the higher self actually comes down and takes you on, threads itself into you. And from that moment on, things like depression go, they're banished forever. There is a certainty about what you're doing. There's a confidence even in the midst of great disaster. You are transfigured for all time. All right? I want to talk to you about nuministe. Numinosum, perhaps I should write it up so we get it spelled correctly. N-U-M, I think, I-N-O-S-U-M. Is that right, Marcus? Numinosum. Numinosum. The definition is the overwhelming power of religious ideas. The overwhelming power of religious ideas. And we've seen it in history. Doctors, psychiatrists would call it straightforward hysteria. Hysteria. And it catches on, it spreads like wildfire through a community. The episode at Waco, the episode with, who was the guy in South America? Jones, yes. How many? 900 people committed suicide under the numinous spreading energy of a religious fanatic. And it's very, very powerful indeed. It is manifesting itself now in the near-death experience with transformative vision. People are dead clinically. They leave the body whilst the paramedics are resuscitating it, and they enter the astral world, and they find themselves in a tunnel of light moving up towards this angelic figure dressed in white satin, glistening all over at the end of the tunnel. And they, as they approach, they are given comfort and advice by this angelic being. And when they come out of it and are resuscitated and are back in their bodies, they remember it, and it has transformed them for the rest of their lives. They now believe in God. They know there's life after death. They don't want to have anything to do with their old religion. They believe in reincarnation. They know that they have to start practicing esoteric unfoldment, and it's with them. And this is the effect of this numinous energy, which is the result of the overwhelming power of the religious idea. Image and instinct have a connection via numinosum. Now, you're all interested in image. An image, a representation of something, an image and instinct. And these are very much related to each other. And so we say that these two are joined together by numinous energy. And so you see an image like, what's the Catholic, the kids in the Catholic thing, Fatima? They see an image of the Virgin Mary, and they are deluged with light and thunderstruck by it. They may go into trance, and these two are linked together, image and instinct. Well, image and numinosum energy links image and instinct together. With animals, of course, it's very strong. Some little thing, an image can bring the instinct, and Freud talked about, it was Jung, said that Freud had a numinous link with sexuality, that somehow or the other anything to do with sexuality in his patients evoked in him a numinosum, which he couldn't shake off, and he had to follow it through to its analysis. And for some animals, the smell instinct of the, for instance, in dogs, of the female hormones is enough to set in motion instinctual activity, and the two are linked together. The image and the instinct are linked together with this numinous energy which was identified a little earlier here with sexuality. Numinosum is woven around and emanating from primordial images. And so we describe these images, Hiawatha to the Indian tribe, Virgin Mary to the Fatima children, relics of saints, parts of their bodies, things that they have worn, bear a numinous energy about them for some people. I've got it here. Sexuality, according to Jung, had a numinous quality for Freud, like a hidden god. Sexuality to him was like a god. Sexual function can assume numinous qualities in neurotic people. And many of the fetishes of sexually disturbed patients are related to neurosis, and they assume this numinous content which the person, the criminal if you like, or the pervert can't shake it off because of the numinous strength of it. The symmetry of an object, like a mandala or any shape, I say, conveys a numinous nature with it. You see something like the Taj Mahal and it hits you. It hits you with its numinous energy, probably related to the symmetry of the structure. We would say also related to the myth of the bereaved husband, the young wife that dies, and he builds her this temple, and it's all there in the Taj Mahal itself, and it hits sensitive spiritual people. They can feel the whole lot behind it. And let's just sort this out. Yes. A symmetry with numinous energy can bring order to something in chaos. And where a person is in a chaotic state, unbalanced, a symmetrical object, especially if already known to the person, can exert a numinous effect on them and calm them down and institute order where there has been chaos. as with what I've just described to you, the out-of-body experience accompanying near death, experience of numinous energies can change the psychic attitudes of the individuals. And these people having a transformative religious experience have their attitudes changed by the presence of numinous energy. Numinosities help when the ego establishes a definite link with the reality of an inner self, or a center or core. And the interplay between the two, that is recognizing that you have discovered your inner self, that voice that you heard, the voice of the silence, was from yourself, and the joy that comes of it, and the exaltation, as if it is a sign from heaven, enables the antakarana to be established between the two. So there is you discover that there is a higher self, that it has talked to you, that it's there forever, and it's greater than anything that you've had. And here you as the personality embrace that experience, and again, and again, and the interplay between the two, and this is a numinous energy linking them, and that evokes the antakarana, the link between the two. So numinous energies are the basis for establishing the antakarana. Archetypes appearing. The archetype as it appears has a compelling force, and when conscious has a numinous transforming quality. I think we see this best in the Red Indian religions, where they do a dance, and the dance evokes a response, and then they begin to feel the numinous energy of their gods, their whoever they are, and they are transformed by it. One of the bad results of this, where it turns rotten, is the Mephistopheles link between, it was alleged to be Paracelsus, but it wasn't. It was, what was the name of the young guy in it? Goethe's Faust, thank you, Claudia. Faust is confronted with Mephistopheles. Faust has a pact with the devil. If you will give me answers to the things I want to know, if you will give me the powers of science, I will give you my soul. And this pact between Faust and Mephistopheles is linked to each other by this numinous energy. And in the end, Mephistopheles comes to claim the soul. How about neglect your culture? I don't know. I'm a historian. I've been trained in it. I don't know of a culture in history that has such a rich background as the English or the Anglo-Saxon culture. The literature is stupendous. The art may not be as high in every respect as others, but the whole culture itself, hardly touched, hardly used, is there for use. And always remember that art brings psychosynthesis. It brings unity. True art has certain messages about it. Poetry definitely unifies. We've all been in trouble. I've been in trouble in the war with constant bombardment, sometimes for weeks on end. Everybody's nerves shattered. Just feel you'd like to run and just not stop running because of the terrible conditions existing. And I found in conditions of great threat, where your sanity seems as if you're just not going to be able to hold them. You've got guys going back with shock all the time, that reciting poetry for me, especially during a bombardment, was very, very unifying and comforting and energizing, especially if you knew it off by heart and did not have to read it, if you could recite it. And I remember in the bombardment that occurred in outside Tobruk, which was particularly heavy, and where your sanity was definitely under threat. I remember holding on to my sanity on one occasion by bringing anything out of my childhood which I could focus my mind on and keep my synthesis together by repeating it. And I remember having attended a church, a high church of England, St. Mary's in Durban, and having learnt all these semi-Catholic intonations. And I've got some of them right, some of them wrong. All I know is that in that crisis, that I spouted out and used it many times. How did it used to go now? It was a ring of utterances. Born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead and buried. The third day rose again from the dead, ascended into heaven, sitteth on the right hand of God the Father Almighty. Born of the Virgin Mary, starting a new cycle. Born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead and buried. The third day rose again from the dead, ascended into heaven, and sitteth on the right hand of God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth and of Jesus Christ. But it kept me sane, fastening the mind on something that had no stop to it, no end to it, and kept the mind occupied instead of running berserk. And so, who knows, perhaps there is something there for young people to work on. A formula, certainly the ancients had it, a formula whereby, under terms of crisis, you could produce a mandala of sound, which can hold you together. And all these things, of course, are psychosynthesizing. Any questions I will take happily. Did I tell you the business of Lyndon Johnson and the advice that he took over Vietnam? Well, you know, we all have such a high opinion of intellectuality, and nothing intellectual there would have held my sanity, I know, not that day anyway. And Lyndon Johnson was under attack, President of the United States, pushed into office because of the Kennedy assassination. And Vietnam was going badly. Americans were losing the war. And somebody said to him, "Why didn't you get the best brains in the country here to give you some advice, collectively, together?" They said, "Yeah, all right, anything." So they got the 20 most intellectual, famous men of the country to Washington. And they all sat down in this room round the big table, and Lyndon Johnson came in, and he said, "Gentlemen, the war in Vietnam is going badly. I want your advice. I want your advice, desperately." So they put their heads together, and the advice came up. And the advice was, prosecute the war with absolute firmness. That's your advice? Yes. He did it. Got worse and worse. He called them all again a year later. The gentlemen, you advised me to prosecute the war in Vietnam. You're the most intellectually famous in our culture. Now what do you say a year later? They all put their heads together and in a few minutes came up with the answer. And the answer was, get out, quick. Get out of Vietnam as quickly as you can. He said, you have done a U-turn in 1 year and switched your advice around completely. How did you come to that first advice you gave me? And they all admitted that they had not pondered it and brooded on it at all. They had just come to that advice like that. And it had been terrible. And I always cite that when people talk about intellect above everything, when there are things like intuition that lie way, way beyond intellect. The intuition is much more reliable in your life, not perhaps in the lives of others you're advising, but in your own life, always follow the intuition. So I thought you would be interested in that. Let me give you let me test you out. Some symbols of wholeness. Some symbols of wholeness. Which are lacking. Something lacking in them. And here's an example. A complete bowl of fruit. All the types of fruit, a complete bowl of fruit, but with a banana missing. Can you imagine a complete bowl of fruit without a banana? Something missing. The wholeness is not there. That's the kind of symbol that you must be prepared to experience. If you get that in a waking dream, or you get it in an answering meditation, that's the kind of thing you must ponder on. Can you really conceive of what would have been a complete basket of fruit without a banana in it? No. I can see you don't grasp what I'm getting at, but that is... And then having led from that to the next image that flows from it. A pair of trousers that is not properly filled, that has no bulge in it. Is it a pair of trousers? Do you see what I'm getting at? Those are the kind of images that you must expect to get back. Forget all the flowery things from the arum lilies from the altar and the cherubims playing with their flutes and goodness knows what. Everyday images which are subtle and very, very powerful indeed, that make you think. That's why you have to learn to brood over these things. Wholeness always comes easier in a room of your own. We classically refer to this as a room of one's own. Virginia Woolf wrote a wonderful little book called A Room of One's Own. And you can never ever get sharing a room with 1, 2, 3, no matter how many. What you can get in a room of one's own, I don't care if it isn't a room. It can be the end of a passageway with a curtain across it. But it must be yours. And it must have your vibrations in it. And be as gentle as you can if it's a struggle to get a room of one's own, but get it. You must brood. Every one of these things you've got to brood over. That's the point of them. That this field is not just straightforward facts and figures, analysis, statistics, not that at all. This has been proved in quantum, that the whole field of quantum is related to laws that have nothing to do with Einstein, nothing to do with Newton, Isaac Newton, which we all grew up with. And that's what you have to prepare yourselves with. That's why we say learn to be malleable. So I've given you some of these to think about. The craving for wholeness is existential. I can't impose it on you and say, now you sit down and think about wholeness tonight. You must feel it within you. I need wholeness. I've had people come to me almost weeping and saying, at festivals where you're all crowded together and enjoying, I must have a place where I can get by myself. Tell me where I can go. And that is an urge, a search for wholeness, to get the higher self with you, so that you are whole again. And therefore you need a unifying factor. I'm not going to go over that again. Always remember that humility is an element of wholeness, because humility is a heart quality. Humility is a heart quality. And the heart quality is embracing everyone. Wholeness, shutting no one out. Stopping any suggestion of divisiveness. Wholeness, the heart, and therefore synthesis. And humility is a heart quality. The great element of sweet surrender. I can go on like this if it's all right. Now I want to read you a quote. I've buttered you up. Now I'm going to give you a quote. It's from the Aeneid, ancient, 2,800 years old. Withdraw into yourself and look. And if you do not find yourself beautiful as yet, do as does the sculptor of a statue. Cut away all that is excessive. Straighten all that is crooked. Bring light to all that is shadowed. Do not cease until there shall shine out on you the godlike splendor of beauty, until you see temperance surely established in the stainless shrine. 2,800 years old. They knew about it then. I like this. There are people who think that treading the path is all misery. And you can make it that way very easily. Treading the path should not always be anguish. A young man in earnest meditation called up to his master, "Master, if I meditate twice a day and again at night, if I pray on my knees every time I sin, if I give up meat and be a vegetarian, if I give up sex and alcohol, will I live to be 100? The master answers, "No, but you'll feel like it." That's a nice way of dealing with that question. Now she's going to go home and take her medication. Because the medication may well reveal the gift.